Your father and mother are in critical condition. You need to cut your trip short and come home immediately. I pleaded desperately to Tyler. But Tyler's response was heartless. I'm on a trip with my colleagues. Handle it on your own. You're probably exaggerating anyway, right? I'm busy, so I'm gonna hang up now. Later. Hold on a second. I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up on me. 2 weeks later. When Tyler came home without any remorse, I spoke up. Both their funerals are over. What? Tyler froze with a puzzled look on his face. What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you trying to play some sick joke on me? He asked me frantically. It's not a joke. Didn't I call you 2 weeks ago that your father and mother were critically ill? I answered Tyler's question. But why so suddenly? Tyler was at a loss for words. My name is Jessica Atkins. I'm 56 years old and a full-time homemaker. I used to work in the administrative department of a major company, but I left the job when I got married. I met my husband Tyler during college. When I became a college student, I joined the tennis club. The reason was simply because a friend invited me. I had never played tennis before. I just wanted to have fun and make friends. That was the feeling when I joined with, but reality was different. At that time, Tyler, who was the head of the tennis club, was a strict guy aiming for national tournaments. For Tyler, it didn't matter whether you had experience or not. It was all about skill. Every day, Tyler would relentlessly serve the ball during practice, and if you couldn't return it, he'd berate you. Being a novice, I couldn't even make contact with the ball using my racket. And Tyler would scold me for it. Jessica, are you kidding me? You're just in the way. Go pick up the balls or something, Tyler said, effectively kicking me off the tennis court. I felt so humiliated by Tyler's insults. I was always relegated to just picking up balls, barely ever holding a racket. Out of sheer frustration, I practiced my tennis swings and form even at home. Perhaps my hard work eventually paid off. One day, as usual, Tyler served the ball, but this time, I managed to powerfully return it. Tyler, seemingly having expected me to miss, stared in shock. But in the next moment, he exclaimed, Jessica, that was incredible, with the biggest smile on his face. It was in that instant that I unexpectedly fell head over heels for him. After that, Tyler continued to be strict, and I kept trying to keep up with his intense training regimen. And then, one day after some time had passed, it was at an evening out drinking with friends. In our group, we have a get-together once a month. The purpose is to deepen our friendships, even outside of our group activities. On the way home from one of those gatherings, I happened to be alone with Tyler. Out of the blue, he confessed his feelings to me. I've fallen for you, Jessica. I want us to be together. I was taken aback. Tyler had never shown any signs of affection towards me. But I had feelings for him too. So, I replied, I like you too. Let's give it a shot. That marked the beginning of our relationship. Tyler wanted to keep our relationship a secret from the club members, so as not to affect the team morale. Still, I was so in love with Tyler back then, I was just happy to be with him. We continued dating even after we both graduated from college, and we got married when I was 26. At Tyler's request, I left my job upon our marriage. I'll always be by Tyler's side from now on. Back then, I was head over heels, daydreaming about a dazzling future with Tyler. 30 years have passed since Tyler and I got married. In the early days, we went on frequent dates and were very close. But, after 30 years, things had become somewhat routine. Even I stopped caring as much about my appearance as I used to. Back in my 20s, I used to wear trendy clothes and was pretty fashionable. Every time I went on a date with Tyler, I remember putting on a full face of makeup. But look at me now. As long as I'm dressed, I don't much care about coordinating outfits. I've grown to love loose skirts with stretchy elastic waists more than those with zippers. Now that I'm a stay-at-home wife, I rarely see other people, so I go barefaced from morning till night. I can't even recall the last time I wore makeup. Some might think I've let myself go. Comparing to my 20s, my body has changed quite a bit. I was fairly slim back then, but not anymore. I've put on weight and now resemble the before pictures you see on weight loss shows. Maybe this change in appearance is one of the reasons our relationship has become routine. Gradually, I feel like Tyler's view of me has shifted from wife to mom. Even though I'm not his mother, he occasionally jokes. "Mom, can I have another coffee?" By the way, my mother-in-law is still around and lives in an apartment about a 10-minute walk from our house with my father-in-law. So, we live close by but separately. My in-laws are wonderful people and always show concern for me. Because they are so caring, I wanted to be there for them, so I visited them often. But lately, my in-laws' health has been declining. My father-in-law has been battling a serious illness, and the doctors say there's not much more they can do. Tearfully, my father-in-law told my mother-in-law and me, "I want to spend my last days at home." So, he was discharged from the hospital and is now receiving palliative care at home. Looking after my father-in-law on her own, my mother-in-law seems exhausted and her expression has darkened. Being a stay-at-home wife, I help with my father-in-law's care almost every day, but living with him must be tough for my mother-in-law. "It's hard, Jessica. Just for one night, could you stay with us?" she asks with a vulnerable expression. "I'm sorry. Tyler comes home at night." It hurt, but I had to turn my mother-in-law down. "I see." Upon hearing my refusal, my mother-in-law murmured with a look of despair. "Every night, I have to take care of Tyler. Tyler is quite the dominant husband and doesn't lift a finger to help around the house. He just throws his dirty socks anywhere. Of course, dinner has to be ready and warm by the time Tyler gets home. Leftovers are absolutely out of the question. If he finds out, there's no telling how much he'll lash out. Once, I couldn't get home in time for Tyler's return because I was taking care of my father-in-law. The moment I got home, Tyler, with a face as red as a beet, yelled at me. "You should prioritize me over my dad. I'm your family, remember?" I wanted to point out that my father-in-law is also his family, but I kept quiet. Because if I had argued, Tyler would have just shouted even louder. Because of things like this, I always have to prioritize Tyler. Every day feels so constricted. Being a stay-at-home wife, I feel guilty and can't stand up to Tyler. I couldn't help my downcast mother-in-law, and could only look at her with concern. Lately, Tyler's been coming home late a lot. And Tyler never lets me know. Sometimes he even comes home on the last train. Today too, Tyler got home past midnight. "I'm back!" Tyler greeted me cheerfully. His face was red, and he seemed a bit tipsy. "Did you go out drinking again? You've been coming home late a lot lately," I said, holding the bag Tyler handed me. "It's my money, and I'll spend it however I want. You're just a stay-at-home wife, so you should just obey me," Tyler retorted gruffly. "But don't you think it's too frequent? Who are you going out with every time? Their families might be worried too," I hesitantly asked Tyler. Maybe Tyler's been forcing people to go drinking with him. Tyler's been with the company for a long time and holds a position of authority. It's hard for most to say no to someone like that. Tyler then replied with a smug smile. "It's all good. I just always drink with the same coworker. Plus, the guy lives alone and is single. He's always happy when I buy him a drink," Tyler said, smugly. I couldn't say anything back, being a stay-at-home wife without much say in matters. Then, I had an idea and decided to talk to Tyler about it. "Could you let me know in advance when you're gonna go out for drinks? Your mom seems really stressed out. And your dad's condition isn't great either. I'd like to be there for them as much as possible." But Tyler laughed off my concerns. "No can do. When I go out depends on my mood. Besides, Mom will handle Dad's situation. Jessica, you should be all in for me." As I was taken aback by Tyler's harsh words, he said. Instead of standing there, get the bath ready. You're so slow. With that, he quickly headed to the bathroom. Yes, I'm sorry. All I could do was respond like that. Then, one day, Tyler suddenly told me, I'm gonna go on a trip for 2 weeks from next week. While I stood there in shock, Tyler cheerfully flipped through a guidebook, pondering what he'd eat. And he was planning to go to Australia. Regaining my composure, I asked Tyler, why the sudden international trip? What about your job? And I don't even have a passport? Tyler seemed a bit annoyed with my questions. I got a bonus, so I thought I'd just go for it. I've already requested PTO from work. And I'm not going with you, Jessica, so you don't need a passport, right? Tyler answered nonchalantly. I haven't even had a proper honeymoon since we got married. Who are you going with? I asked Tyler. Even for day trips, Tyler would say it's a waste of money and never took me along. Now this sudden international trip? It seemed suspicious. I stared intently at Tyler. Tyler retorted, I'm going with a guy from work. Now, get dinner ready already. I realized it would be challenging to press him further. Tyler probably wouldn't answer me if I continued to ask, and might even snap at me. Though I felt frustrated, I reluctantly started preparing dinner. And that day, Tyler left for his trip early in the morning. But by noon, I found myself frantically calling Tyler. What do you want? I'm about to board a plane for an international trip. Read the room. Tyler snapped at me as soon as he answered. My in-laws are in critical condition. Please cancel your trip and come home immediately. I pleaded with Tyler desperately. If he hadn't boarded the plane yet, there was still time. At least, that's what I thought. But Tyler's response was cold. I'm on vacation with my colleague. Handle it yourself. You're probably exaggerating anyway. I'm busy, gonna hang up now. Bye. Wait a second. I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up anyway. No matter how many times I called back, he didn't answer. You'll regret this, I whispered to myself. 2 weeks later. I'm back. Tyler walked in cheerfully, carrying a large suitcase. I approached the unapologetic Tyler and said, both their funerals are over. What? Tyler looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand what I was saying. What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you playing some kind of sick joke? Tyler, clearly panicking, questioned me. I sighed deeply at Tyler's flustered demeanor. It's no joke. Don't you remember I called you 2 weeks ago telling you your parents were critically ill? I replied to Tyler's question. But, why all of a sudden? Tyler trailed off, unable to find the words. And I found myself sitting on the floor. When I went to visit your parents, they both had collapsed with pale faces. I called an ambulance in a panic, but the doctor said they were both in critical condition. Your dad needed care for a while now, and your mom had been looking unwell recently. Just a series of unfortunate events, I guess. I explained to Tyler, with a detached tone, about the events leading up to my in-laws' critical condition. I'm truly heartbroken that my in-laws ended up like this. I was visiting my in-laws' house almost every day and still couldn't save them in time. To this day, I regret not going to their place sooner. But right now, I'm just so angry at Tyler. My in-laws are his real parents. Yet, Tyler chose himself over them until the very end. No matter how much I pleaded, Tyler always prioritized himself. Remembering the tired look on my mother-in-law's face just makes me even angrier at Tyler. Tyler, with a grimaced face, remained silent. He probably can't come to terms with reality. I decided to press Tyler further. It's your fault, isn't it? Choosing a trip with your colleague over your own parents. Did you enjoy your vacation? I asked Tyler with a sly smile. But Tyler just stayed silent. So, I decided to prod a bit more. Well, I guess a trip with your lover is fun, right? 2 weeks seems a bit long though. When I said that, Tyler, as if resigning himself, began to talk. You knew? Yeah, I've been seeing Baker from work. She's over a decade younger than you, and she comforts me. It seems Tyler was indeed cheating. His recent late nights were probably because of his affair with this Baker. As I stayed silent, Tyler, thinking I had accepted his confession, began to talk more. Baker is nothing like you. She has a slim figure, is beautiful, and she has a job. You're nothing compared to her. Tyler was clearly proud of himself. Huh. Not caring at all, I responded nonchalantly. He seemed to forget he had asked me to become a stay-at-home wife after we got married. Then, as if he had an idea, Tyler made a suggestion. That's right. Now that my parents are gone and there's no one to oppose a divorce with you, and I can live here with Baker. So leave right now. I was flabbergasted by Tyler's words. Up to now, I'd been a stay-at-home wife, always deferring to whatever Tyler said. I had no regular income of my own, and part of me lacked the confidence to move out and support myself. But after seeing Tyler prioritize a trip with his mistress over his critically ill parents, I didn't want to be with him anymore. Fine, I'll leave right now. Goodbye. And with that, I packed a minimal amount of stuff and left the house. A week after I started staying at a budget motel, my husband Tyler called my cell. Hello? As soon as I picked up, Tyler jumped in. I can't find the checkbook at home. He sounded pretty panicked. However, I left all the statements under Tyler's name at the house. Of course, that includes the bank book where Tyler's salary gets deposited. The only checkbook I took is in my name. Did you check properly? As soon as I said that, Tyler shouted. It's the checkbook in your name. That account had a pretty good amount of money, right? It's a joint property, so half of it's mine, isn't it? After recklessly spending on trips and whatnot, I couldn't believe Tyler was now bringing up joint property. Holding back a heavy sigh, I calmly responded. The money in that checkbook is from gifts I received from my family and savings from when I was single. So it doesn't count as joint property, you know? Tyler, sounding frantic, replied. That's a problem. I nearly spent all of my last month's salary and bonus on the overseas trip. I thought I could cover the shortfall in our living expenses by withdrawing from your account. Up until now, I'd kept my checkbook in a drawer where Tyler could easily see it. I had no intention of hiding it from Tyler. So Tyler must have sneaked a peek at the balance. I've moved out, Tyler, so I have no idea about your living expenses. Maybe ask for an advance on your paycheck? I firmly declined Tyler's request. Then, I added, just to give Tyler a heads up. By the way, you might want to assume that there's hardly any inheritance from your parents. They were living on their pensions, and with the cost of your father's care, they were barely getting by. And you better clear out their rented apartment soon, or you'll be paying rent every month. My in-laws had been living in a rented apartment, barely making ends meet with the rent and the cost of caring for my father-in-law. My mother-in-law somehow managed to save and get by each month. I reckon my mother-in-law had her share of worries and stress. You're kidding. Tyler sounded shocked over the phone. So, I decided to give Tyler the final blow. I have no responsibilities to help you out. You are on your own, I declared cheerfully. Why? Tyler's voice was full of disbelief. Tyler is already struggling with money, and he's probably panicking. Moreover, he's lost my in-laws and has no one else to turn to. I've already lost my real parents. How can you be so heartless? Are you some kind of monster? Tyler cried out, venting his frustrations at me. Despite having kicked me out with no income, he seemed to have forgotten that. I have no sympathy for Tyler who's lost so much. It's all Tyler's fault. So, I laughed and replied. Well, duh. You cheated. Don't expect me to help you out after what you have done. Hearing the word cheated, Tyler flinched. I don't want to ask the company for the help. If the company finds out about Baker and me, it'll be a disaster. Tyler's voice was shaky. But it was not my concern. I don't even know the face of Baker. It's you and Baker who did wrong in the first place, right? I challenged Tyler. I hope they both lose their social credibility. I've got nothing left to lose. Whatever happens to them, it's none of my business. It's all my fault. Just help me out this time, please. Tyler pleaded with a voice full of desperation. No way. You're gonna regret this big time. I told him that and ended the call with Tyler. Tyler and I eventually got divorced. At first, Tyler was reluctant to agree to the divorce, mainly because of the financial issue. But in the end, he was persuaded by the lawyer I hired and signed the divorce papers. Tyler always acted arrogant in front of me and my in-laws but was very submissive in front of others. He's the kind who's all bark and no bite. That's probably why Tyler couldn't stand up to a professional like the lawyer and ended up being told what to do. Our properties will be split equitably. All thanks to my lawyer. Tyler had almost exhausted his savings on a trip abroad with Baker. So, he was tight on cash. My lawyer guessed that Tyler will be very uncooperative. But in the end, I was pleased with the situation. Now, about what happened afterward. It seems Tyler is living paycheck to paycheck, having difficulty to support himself. On top of that, he had additional expenses like cleaning out and paying rent for the rental apartment of my in-laws. And apparently, he got dumped by Baker. Initially, Baker was very ambitious and got close to Tyler for her own career advancement. But affair was exposed right after we got divorced. Tyler got demoted, and it seems Baker got transferred to a remote branch. If Director Adkins is getting demoted, I don't need him anymore. Thanks for everything. That's what was said, and Tyler got dumped. Though Tyler got demoted, he didn't get transferred within the company. So, he seems to be feeling out of place and uncomfortable. Now, being dumped by Baker and all alone, Tyler has contacted me through my lawyer. I messed up. I broke up with Baker, so I want another shot with you. That's what I heard through the attorney. Since I've already blocked Tyler's calls, it seems like his only option is to relay messages through the lawyer. Knowing Tyler's usually timid nature, the fact that he's pleading with the lawyer like this tells me he's really backed into a corner. On top of that, he's been saying things like, I'm seriously out of money right now. Can you lend me some from your savings back when you were single? Please! Making demands that don't benefit me in the slightest. Even the attorney seemed taken aback by this and relayed it to me with a chuckle. I guess Tyler's gonna have a tough life from here on out. Frankly, I hope he continues to struggle and squirm. By the way, I got in touch with Baker through the lawyer, and she responded in a very respectful way. I was told, through the lawyer, that she said, when I was with Mr. Tyler, my expenses were quite low, so I had fun with his money. But it did not last long. Please tell her I deeply regret everything. It seems she was never really interested in Tyler, just his position. Tyler was head over heels for Baker, and to see him ruin his life over it, it's quite pitiful. Thinking of Tyler's misfortune made me smirk. Since then, I've decided to get back to work. Would you believe it, I took a part-time job at a convenience store. It's my first time in customer service, but it's surprisingly fun. I was initially worried about being on my feet all day. But once I started, time just flies, and it's a blast. Beyond working the register, there's ordering products, frying snacks, and a lot more to convenience store work. I even get to use my housekeeping skills with the cleaning tasks. I've heard from the manager that if I work hard, I could become a permanent employee. Apparently, there's been others like me who made the transition. Being in my 50s is like being at the halfway point in life. Being divorced, I initially thought my future was bleak. But even at this age, I'm discovering new things and having a ball. I want to keep looking forward and keep on moving. That's how I feel right now. A mom friend who always finds a reason not to pay for meals. She invites me to go out and then leaves without paying, as if it's natural. I had become the one who always pays. One day, she invited me to a hotel and said, pay $1,500. I was confused and asked, "What are you talking about?" And she demanded that I pay for our share of the lodging. She was saying something so unreasonable. I'm still in shock, but I'm going to give her a dose of reality. I am Michelle, a 45-year-old office worker. I live with my husband of 18 years, our middle school daughter, and elementary school son. Since both my husband and I work, we share household chores. Whoever has free hands does the dishes, and we cooperate to manage our daily lives. My husband actively takes care of our kids, driving our daughter to her sports activities, playing catch with our son. He's a great father. I'm happy to spend time with such a considerate husband and cute children. Then one day, a person who shattered my peaceful daily life appeared. Michelle, wanna go out for coffee sometime? One morning, while I was taking out the trash, the one who spoke to me was my neighbor and fellow mom, Susan. Good morning, coffee, you say? I asked back, and she replied. There's a cafe that opened nearby that sells delicious bread. I thought we might go together. Apparently, a trendy cafe that sells popular Korean bread had opened nearby. Oh, I see. I said non-committally, but Susan was thinking to herself. Oh, Michelle, you have work, right? Yeah. And seemed to be considering something. Susan, a mom of my daughter's classmate, hadn't talked much before, but we'd had some interaction lately. Let's go on Saturday. Yes, that'll be good. Susan was excited, but I wasn't enthusiastic. To be honest, between work, housework, and childcare on weekdays, I want my 2 days off for family time. As I was thinking of refusing, Susan said, On Saturday, your daughter has sports, and your son said he has plans with friends, so there's no problem, right? I was surprised that Susan knew my children's schedules, and asked, How do you know that? She cheerfully responded, I heard from David, who's in the same sports activities, that there's practice, and your son said he's going out to play. It became hard to refuse Susan, who was in such a good mood. So, Saturday it is. She left after stating the date and meeting place, and I had committed to going to the cafe. Then Saturday came, and I was feeling down after working overtime. We were supposed to meet at the station, but Susan was nowhere to be seen even 10 minutes later. Michelle! I saw Susan waving from a distance, looking cheerful. Oh, it's a bit chilly today, she said, without apologizing for being late, and talked all the way from the station to the cafe. When we arrived at the cafe, there was a surprisingly long line, even though it had only been open for an hour. Oh my, lots of young people. Most of the other customers were young people. I suggested going to another store because of the long wait, but Susan stubbornly refused, saying, No, I want to eat this bread. We waited in line for an hour. Finally seated, guided by the staff. Phew, I'm tired. Michelle, you should have gotten the drinks ready, Susan said. Holding back my frustration, I smiled and apologized. Sorry for not being thoughtful. The bread at the cafe Susan had strongly recommended was indeed delicious, and I felt very satisfied. I thought about coming with my family next time. As we were about to leave, Susan said, Excuse me, I need to go to the restroom, and headed to the toilet. After waiting 5 more minutes, feeling the stares of people in the waiting line, I paid the bill. Another 10 minutes outside, Susan came out of the shop, saying, Sorry to keep you waiting. My stomach hurt a little. I asked about her condition, and she said, I'm fine now. Walking ahead of me. As I tried to speak, Susan cut me off and asked, Hey, are you thirsty or something? What do you want? Come on, pick something. Even when I declined, she insisted. Come on. Push the button, hurry. I was almost forcibly told to choose, and so I picked some tea. It's on me, enjoy your drink, she said, so I thanked her, and Susan was smug about it. Could it be that she thinks this will cover the cost of the coffee and the bread? I don't feel comfortable explicitly saying, Please pay. Normally, wouldn't you ask the person how much it was? Feeling a bit uneasy, we arrived at the station before I knew it. Susan quickly went home, saying she had something to do. Since then, every time I was invited for tea, Susan would ditch the bill. Not only that, but she seems to be inquiring about my family's activities from other people. Meanwhile, she leaves her kids with her in-laws on Saturdays and Sundays and goes out with friends, hardly ever being at home. Lately, she has even been leaving her kids with us to go out drinking on weekday nights. She had been checking when we would be home to drop off her child. Bringing the child before dinner, she said. "Oh, is it dinner time? Well then, please take care of my child too." The child was happy to eat with us, saying it felt like siblings, but it wouldn't be the same for the adults. "Is your husband not home?" I asked, to which she replied. "He is on a business trip a lot, so he's not here right now. Take care, okay?" It seems her husband is away a lot for work. Hold on, at least pay for the food, please. Honestly, with 2 growing children, the cost of food can be quite a burden. It doesn't make much difference with just 2 more, Susan said, leaving, but any homemaker should understand. A month has already passed since we started living this way, and the kids are on summer vacation. On the way home, Susan from the neighborhood invited us to go out with our families. What should we do? On his way home from work, my husband had been approached by Susan. Since Susan's husband would be home, she invited us to go out during the holiday. If it's with the family, it's probably fine. If her husband is there, it shouldn't be a problem, right? I thought, with some apprehension. I don't know. But the kids seem to be on board. It seems he had already mentioned it to the children, and it was set between them and Susan. "It depends on you and my schedule," he said. I was so dumbfounded by Susan's strong-arm tactics that I couldn't say anything. If the kids are looking forward to it, we have no choice. I contacted Susan, and we decided on the time and place while discussing the details, and the day finally arrived. "Hey, where's your husband?" Her husband, who was supposed to be there, was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, he had to go on a sudden business trip. It seems Susan's husband won't be able to join, and it'll just be her and her 2 children. Then I'll follow behind. We drove separately to the destination. We arrived at a rental campground with fully equipped facilities, including cottages, and we were going to stay overnight and return the next day. While we were preparing the barbecue, the kids were already playing. Once everything was ready, we started grilling the meat. We had reserved food for 10, which was 2 extra servings. Since Susan's husband wasn't there, we had 3 extra servings, and I was worried that we might have too much. Breakfast is always the kids' favorite, but during the summer break, thinking of the menu for lunch and dinner is such a hassle, isn't it? We were just having a casual conversation, while Susan just sat there. That's why, today we're just grilling meat. Easy peasy. My husband and I are busy preparing the barbecue and frantically grilling meat, while Susan just sits there, doing nothing, with a cool expression on her face. We have to watch the kids properly, after all. She says this but only watches the children from afar. When I call the children to eat the grilled meat, she reaches out and takes it, saying, "Wow, that looks delicious." Oh. My children and I all wear surprised expressions, and Susan suddenly realizes. "Oh, is this for the children?" I was thinking of giving it to the children first, but it's fine since we're grilling more. The children look disappointed, and I thought Susan would apologize, but she just laughs and says, "You better eat quickly, or I'll eat it all up." My husband and the kids are utterly taken aback by this. And then there's Susan, eating even more meat than the growing children. We had planned 1 lamb chop per person, but she has already had 4 and is reaching for more. "Susan, you've reserved only 1 lamb chop per person. You've already eaten 2 extra ones for yourself and your husband, so please eat something else." It might seem like a trivial matter, but there's no substitute food because it's by reservation. What? There are restrictions on what I can eat? That's stingy, she said, to which I replied. Didn't you check when you made the reservation? She should have known exactly what and how much was available since we decided on it together. When we were planning, and we talked about ordering more because we have growing children, she said. I don't eat much, I have a small appetite. Just think of me as not there, and one extra portion should be fine. With my children who eat well and the men around, I thought it would be safe to order for 10 people. We had 2 middle school children who could eat 2 portions each, and 1 elementary school child who could eat 2 portions, so there shouldn't have been any problem with the amount. But the meat was disappearing quickly. Mom, I want to eat that meat, my son said, reaching for the meat he wanted, only to have Susan snatch it and eat it quickly. I was angry, but my usually mild-mannered husband was starting to show his irritation as well. The reason we couldn't strongly object was that Susan's children were also there. Mom, don't act like a child, said Susan's daughter. What are you talking about? Camping is all about survival, and survival means fighting over meat. The children seemed dumbfounded by Susan's childish behavior. Afterward, we finished the barbecue, played outside for a while, and then decided to take a break. The cottages were separate, so we could get away from Susan and catch our breath. It was supposed to be fun, but it's just so tense. My husband looked tired. Yeah, let's eat breakfast and head home early tomorrow. We spent the rest of the time relaxing with the family and greeted the morning. Good morning. Susan came out of her cottage cheerfully. Good morning. You're lively this morning, I replied, and she said, Of course. I ate a lot and relaxed, and had a great time. For breakfast, we ate the provided sandwiches, played a little more, and then started preparing to leave. During the final payment, Susan was nowhere to be found. Susan's not here, I told my husband, and we looked around, but Susan's children were also missing. Hey, where's Susan and her kids? I asked the children if they had seen her. They said they were going to the restroom. Apparently, Susan told her daughter she was going to the restroom, and told the children to go to the restroom before leaving. How would you like to handle the payment? Asked the cashier. Please wait a little longer, I replied, and after waiting 10 more minutes, Susan still hadn't returned. Isn't this taking too long? I went to check the restroom. But Susan and her children were nowhere to be found, and her car, which was supposed to be parked next door, was gone too. What? My husband also looked surprised. It seemed that Susan and her family had already left. I couldn't believe it. I was on the verge of exploding with anger. To invite us and then run away without paying, it was enough to drive me insane. The total cost of the camping equipment, cottage accommodation, drinks, meat, and everything else came close to $900. Susan had confirmed the approximate amount at the time of reservation, and she had been the one who chose the place. She had rejected all the places I suggested and insisted that this particular place was perfect. Choosing a location that only allowed on-site payment seems like a premeditated act now. We decided to head straight to Susan's house. Susan, please open up. After ringing the doorbell several times, Susan reluctantly opened the door. Susan, why did you leave without saying anything? I questioned. Huh? Didn't I say I was leaving? She pretended not to know. Susan, you have to pay on the spot. Hand over the money, I told her a bit forcefully. Oh, I forgot. But I don't have any money right now, Susan replied. We confirmed the amount in advance, didn't we? You were the one who set the budget, Susan. I hadn't mentioned it before, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer. But she kept saying she had no money, so I asked what was going on. I bought something I wanted before the camping trip. Look, she said, laughing and showing off what she had bought. So you didn't have any money during the camping trip? I asked, getting a bit irritated but continuing to question. Yeah, I didn't have it when I reserved, so what? I was fed up with Susan, who kept laughing without feeling sorry at all. You planned this from the beginning, I said, and she replied. Well, thanks to me inviting you, we we had a great time. It's a win-win situation, isn't it? So I confirmed one last time. So you have no intention of paying? You're so persistent, it's embarrassing. I told you I don't have the money. When I get it, I'll pay you back. Or are you trying to squeeze money out of someone who doesn't have any? With no shame and an unapologetic attitude, Susan laughed, and I reached my breaking point. I see, understood. I went home without saying anything more and discussed the situation with my husband. Time passed, and Susan suggested, Michelle, a tasty restaurant opened nearby. Let's go. She acted as if the past incident never happened. I'm sorry, I'm busy, so I'll have to pass. I had been turning down Susan's invitations for the past few months. Losing patience, Susan approached me with an angry look. Hey, are you avoiding me? You're still holding a grudge over the camping thing? A few hundred or a few $1,000s, so what? I can't believe you'd avoid someone over that, even if it were several tens of thousands. Susan ranted, infuriated and talking fast. Is that so? Susan, let's go to an inn next time. I suggested a trip to Susan. Huh? Oh, sure, you planned it? In that case, I'll have to coordinate with my family. Susan became cheerful. I told her my husband had given me some alone time and was thinking of going on a 2-night trip. When asked if my husband would mind taking care of the kids, I declined, saying he was busy. To the hesitant Susan, I said, I plan to stay for 2 nights from Friday. If it's difficult, I'll go alone. To which she replied, Wait, in that case, I'll leave them with my in-laws. Susan said she would leave them with her husband's parents and go on the trip. When I showed her the exterior of the inn, Susan became even more delighted. I'll book 2 rooms. There seems to be a spa and all. I told her about the inn, and Susan started to look up various things on her own. How about I invite my friends too? She said, so I told her I'd make the reservations all at once. A month later, the day of the inn reservation arrived. Susan and her friends were at my house, looking puzzled at me. Aren't you going to drive us? Sorry. I have to stop by my in-laws, so let's go separately. I said, and Susan reluctantly agreed, and we headed to the inn in different cars. Wow, I can't believe we're staying at such a lovely inn. Michelle, thank you. Everyone was amazed at the magnificence of the inn. Let's enjoy our free time then. Susan and her friends were having a great time, seemingly forgetting about me. The first day was just eating, bathing, and sleeping. After the bath, I ran into Susan and her friends having a huddled conversation. Hey, Susan. Are you sure about staying at such an expensive inn? Can you afford it? One of Susan's friends asked. Yes, it's all on me. Susan boasted. Amazing. It's over $1,000 per person per night. So generous. In that case, I'll turn off notifications for texts and calls, and spend time in this dream world until we leave the hotel. Susan said she would pay for 5 friends lodging in full, and everyone was getting excited. The morning of the second day, they went to the spa for massages, and were able to spend a meaningful time healing their everyday fatigue. I tried texting Susan, but she didn't read it or reply even by night. It seemed she was having a good time. Hello, Michelle, it's morning already. Cheerful Susan called. Yes, that's right. I replied, wondering why I was stating the obvious. You overslept, so it's your fault, right? We're going home first, so pay $15,000. Susan said something utterly unexpected. Huh? Oversleep? $15,000? What are you talking about? I didn't understand what she meant. The last one always pays, right? Susan said, so I replied. Yeah. I'm already home, though. Didn't you see my text? I had told Susan I was going home through text. Oh, I wouldn't be looking at my phone in such a fabulous, unreal place. I explained the situation to Susan. I went home on the second night. My mother-in-law seems to be feeling unwell, so I came to my parents' house early. Originally, I was only going to pick up the children and husband who were out playing, but as my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well, I decided to leave early. Why didn't you say something? Susan was angry. I told her that my husband contacted me late, so I texted her, and she asked, "What? What about the bill?" Thinking she was mad about me going home without paying my share, I said, "Don't worry, I've already paid." "Oh, right, that's fine then. We just have to return the keys at the front desk and go home," Susan said, her tone returning to calm. "Well, yes. Since it's on-site payment, please stop by the front desk. My part has been properly deducted. If the front desk handled everything properly, there shouldn't be a problem," I explained. "You did pay, right?" Susan asked again. "Yes, I paid my part before I left, so it's okay," I replied. However, Susan's next words made me uneasy. "What about our part?" With this question, I was sure that Susan intended to make me pay. "Please pay for yourselves. I heard after the bath that Susan, you were going to pay for your friends, right?" Well, that's..." Susan stammered. "You're amazing. Honestly, I thought you were the worst kind of person for always disappearing when it's time to pay. So you really were going to pay back the money for the camp later. I misunderstood you, Susan, I'm sorry," I joked, building her up. "Wait a minute." I cut off Susan's protest and said, "Tell me all about your wonderful time when you get back. See you later." And I hung up the phone. When I got home, my worried husband asked, "Are you okay?" But I smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." Susan and the others seemed to have a great time. Later, Susan, who had invited her friends by saying, "I'll pay," somehow managed to pay using multiple credit cards. When Susan returned, her complexion was very bad, unlike the last person she had met at the inn. "I never intended to pay," she screamed as she went home. According to what the children heard from Susan's children, her husband, who had returned from a business trip, scolded her terribly. "You have to earn and pay that large amount of $15,000 yourself," he said, and she seemed to have started working part-time. For Susan, who had been leading a sloppy life, leaving housework and childcare to others, it must be a very tough time. She seems to be working so hard that she has no time to rest, both physically and mentally. I no longer get invitations to play from Susan, nor do I have to look after her children, and I've been able to regain a peaceful daily life. On holidays, I can spend time leisurely with my family, and I'm very happy. And then, finally, Bob said the worst possible thing. "From next month, clear out your room. When my mother gets discharged from the hospital, I'm gonna bring her straight to this house. Living together might make household chores easier, but I'll have to face my mother-in-law and endure her snide comments every single day." I was utterly devastated. I understand. He seems hell-bent on making this happen with his mother. Rather than arguing with him, it's better to discreetly take measures. I've learned that from years of experience. Bob left, not suspecting a thing, and seemed quite pleased. Everything's going according to my plan. It's so simple it's laughable. A few hours later, after tidying up and taking a break, my phone rang loudly. It was a frantic call from Bob. "Hey, what the heck? The house is empty." I am Catherine Rose, a 45-year-old working mother and hold a managerial position at a publishing company. I have a husband and 2 kids. A typical American family. When I got married, the idea of balancing work and family was just beginning to gain traction. It was an era when it was common for women to marry and become homemakers. Bob had allowed me to work. In return, I've given my all to both my job and household chores. After having kids, I've been fully committed to raising them as well. But lately, I've been feeling overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, Mary, who was initially against me working, has started to complain recently. "When are you gonna stop this job nonsense? Leaving your husband like that, you're such a terrible wife. Back in our day, the job came second, our main duty was to dedicate ourselves to our homes. I've been working hard in both my career and home, raising the kids and managing household chores. I always thought of it as repaying the kindness Bob showed by supporting my career. Perhaps seeing my dedication, both my daughter and son help around the house. My daughter does the laundry and ironing, while my son takes care of the bath and fills the tub every day. When I come home, I just have to prepare the meal and clean up. I'm so grateful to my kids, but even though we're both working, Bob doesn't lift a finger. I've asked him to help out several times. But Bob's answer was always the same. Catherine, I let you keep working, didn't I? You're trying to skip out on your wife duties and make me do the chores because you want to have an easy life? Quit playing the victim. And every time, my mother-in-law would tattle on me, and I'd get an earful from her. Bob's the breadwinner of the family, you know? And you're trying to make him do house chores? What are you thinking, Mary? This is why it's never good for a woman to work. Be grateful I even let you work. Understand your place. Lately, perhaps she's bored, but almost every night she calls with these snide remarks. It's become so frequent and unbearable that both my kids and I are fed up. My kids have even started pretending they are needed somewhere else to hang up the phone. Sure, I'm grateful they let me continue working, but why all this hostility? I've been the one handling both the household chores and raising the kids. She should know how hard it is to juggle both roles. What more does she want from me? Right now, I'm under so much stress. The only saving grace is that my kids are on my side. The root cause of this is Bob's salary. Truth be told, Bob's pay isn't that great. It would probably be considered on the lower end. He had a tough time finding a job, and eventually landed one at a small company thanks to a family connection. If he'd shown some initiative, I wouldn't have cared about the low salary and would have supported him wholeheartedly. But Bob got down on himself because of the way he got the job. I should have been working at a bigger, more renowned company. In the beginning, he used to mutter things like this. He only ever did the work given to him, never striving for promotions or looking for new job opportunities. Someone truly capable would have studied on the side, or honed their skills to find better job opportunities. But Bob didn't, so he only ever got raises based on seniority. His performance-based bonuses were always the bare minimum. On the other hand, the company I work for is a nationwide corporation that had parental leave policies in place early on. It felt the effects of the economic bubble, but it's a reputable company that's managed to avoid major salary cuts. What's more, I've climbed up to the position of manager. I've successfully handled a significant number of contracts and projects. Naturally, I earn considerably more than Bob. I'm even covering our kids' expenses, using my paycheck to set aside money for their college funds. I've taken full advantage of the benefits of working for a large corporation. Looking back, I feel like I was living off my savings when I took parental leave for my 2 children and had no salary. With Bob's salary, there's no way he could cover all the living expenses with 2 kids. I don't recall ever receiving living expenses from Bob, and there's no record of any transfers. Maybe Bob let me continue working because he thought he could rely on my earnings. Lately, I've been thinking this a lot. Ever since we got married, I've started to wonder if we've mostly been living on my salary. To confirm this suspicion, I looked at my bank book. The rent, utilities, groceries, and the kids' school fees, I've been paying for all of it. There's not a single penny coming in from Bob's account. Eventually, I just laughed it off, feeling drained. Bob's salary is all gone, spent on his hobbies and giving pocket money to my mother-in-law. I've always thought that I owed Bob for letting me continue working. That's why I've been trying so hard with the household chores and childcare. But look at the situation now. I'm covering all the living expenses, while Bob spends his salary freely without saving a dime. When it comes to supporting our lives, wouldn't you say I'm the main breadwinner? Having me cover the living expenses while Bob does whatever he pleases, I'd say I've repaid the favor of letting me work. Yet, Bob's catchphrase is, "I'm the one supporting y'all. If you've got a problem, just leave." What's he thinking, claiming he's the one supporting us? Is he thinking he's covering the living expenses while freely spending his own salary? It's a total mystery, and I just can't understand. If I, who's paying for everything, were to leave with the kids, what would happen? Or if I threw this bank book at him and told him to leave, would Bob just quietly go? But, sticking to his claim that he's the main breadwinner, he'd probably tattle to my mother-in-law. I wonder if my mother-in-law knows about the difference in our salaries. No, if she knew, she probably wouldn't make those snide remarks. She must think he's a wonderful son, supporting his family and even allowing his wife to work. If she knew about the difference in our salaries, what would she think? Would she ditch Bob and cozy up to me? Nah, that's the last thing I'd want. If Bob and I were to part ways, I wonder what would become of him and my mother-in-law. What would they do? Tired of the snide remarks from my mother-in-law, I often find myself pondering these thoughts. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law had an accident at her home and hurt her foot. It seems she's gonna need hospitalization and physical therapy for a while. My father-in-law passed away before Bob and I got married, so my mother-in-law has been living alone. So either Bob or I have to take care of my mother-in-law. Are you really gonna leave me all by myself when I'm in such a state? Come to the hospital ASAP. My foot hurts so bad I can't move, and I've got a ton of things I need done. I quickly received a call from the hospitalized my mother-in-law. The moment I answered, she started with her demands, wanting this and that. I was at work, and whenever I tried to mention it, my mother-in-law would just lash out. I'm swamped with work, so I decided to let Bob handle her. Honestly, getting criticized by my mother-in-law for working is a huge stressor. Right now, it's best if Bob visits the hospital to cheer up my mother-in-law. When I asked Bob to care for my mother-in-law, he immediately began to complain. "Hey, Catherine, why aren't you looking after Mom? I'm working too, you know." Despite being his mother, he just tosses all the caregiving responsibilities to his wife. Wouldn't one think to at least visit her once or twice on their own? Holding back my frustration, I replied, "I have work too, Bob. Plus, all the chores at home. If you'd help around the house, maybe I could visit her. More importantly, I think your mom would be happier if it was you who came to care for her." This is true. Though some may vent their stress by snapping at their daughter-in-law, when one is immobile, it's better to think and talk positively. So, I kept finding reasons to avoid caring for my mother-in-law. Instead, I would neatly wash and fold my mother-in-law's laundry and pack it in a bag. If my mother-in-law asked for something specific, I'd buy it after checking the name of the products she requested. Even if Bob took credit for those things and I got the blame, I didn't mind. I just didn't want to hear my mother-in-law's snide remarks. Thankfully, it seems my judgment was right. My mother-in-law greets Bob with a big smile every day. Apparently, for a mother like my mother-in-law, nothing beats the joy of being cherished by her son. Having her beloved son around must feel much better than dealing with a daughter-in-law she'd want to make sarcastic comments about. Every day, it seems like she waits for Bob to come home from work. She must be really focused on chatting with Bob. She even hands Bob a shopping list note, and she hasn't called me since the first time she was admitted to the hospital. Seeing my mother-in-law's smiling, Bob probably feels he's being a good son. Even after he gets home, he's in a good mood. At night, when Bob returns, he simply hands me the laundry and shopping notes without any complaints. When handing over my mother-in-law's stuff, Bob throws in some sarcastic remarks at me, but still, I was able to live peacefully. Honestly, I just don't want to hear any of my mother-in-law's complaints right now. That's what I murmured to myself in the middle of the night. It'd be nice if things could stay peaceful for a while. But injuries take a toll at my mother-in-law's age. Through Bob, I was pushing hard for her rehab, but my mother-in-law, delighted with her son's visits, tended to skip it. As a result, by the time her injury healed, her legs had become weak. Bob would visit her in the evening after his work. Yet, my mother-in-law would skip her daytime rehab, just waiting in her room for Bob's visit. And after getting a taste of her son's care, my mother-in-law started making all sorts of requests from Bob. She rarely calls on me directly, but when it comes to things like laundry, I'm the one who actually does it. Running errands and doing laundry, even bringing her snacks, became a daily routine. All she did was sit in her hospital room and chat cheerfully with her son, while I did the housework. It was a relief not to see my mother-in-law, but I was worn out. My mother-in-law's requests were many, and shopping alone was a significant chore. I get that hospitals can be boring, but why does she want so much stuff? If her legs have become weak, living alone surely becomes inconvenient. It seems my mother-in-law realized that too. Then, my mother-in-law made a shocking request to Bob. My legs aren't moving well anymore. Shopping and preparing meals have become so difficult. Bob, please don't leave me alone. Of course, Bob sided with my mother-in-law. Right, maybe we should live together. It might be easier for Catherine to take care of you. The two of them were moving in the direction of living together without consulting me. And then, Bob broke the worst news to me. I'm gonna be living with my mother starting next month. Clear out your room. When she gets out of the hospital, I'll bring her straight here. From the perspective of efficiency in doing house chores, it's certainly easier for my mother-in-law to live with us. As for me, I'll have to see my mother-in-law every day and get nagged at each time. My feelings were extremely downcast. Bob acted like it was already a done deal that we'd all live together. I understand, I replied, with little energy. Bob seemed determined to force this co-living situation, no matter the despair I felt. It might be better to secretly make plans rather than argue about it now. I knew this from years of experience. While Bob and my mother-in-law happily planned for the move, I constantly thought about how I could escape. I have my own room where I gather and review work materials. There are many books and files in that room. Whether you call it a study or an office, it's essential for me. Bob wants me to give it up. Without this room, my work would be impacted. I might have to come home even later than I do now. I muttered to myself while staring at the bookshelf. Where should I move all these books and documents? I can't leave them at home if we live with my mother-in-law. They're too important to risk getting thrown away or damaged. It may sound like something out of a TV drama, but I really fear she might throw them out. Especially since she'll probably target what she knows is important to me. And if I dare complain, she'll feign ignorance and run to Bob for support. She didn't know they were important, Bob. Catherine's mad even though it was an accident. Help! There'll be no peace for me in this house once we start living together. I can see her bossing me around and making snide remarks about my work, wearing me out. What should I do? If my mother-in-law is coming to this house. I had a sudden realization. Why hadn't I thought of this simple solution before? It seems living with my mother-in-law and all her nagging wore me down more than I realized. It felt like the fog before my eyes was gradually clearing up. Well, of course, there's absolutely no need for me to hold back. Why didn't I realize something so simple? I mumbled to myself and immediately began making preparations. And as the month changed, the day of my mother-in-law's discharge from the hospital arrived. Bob was all excited, having taken the day off from the start of the morning. Hey, you better take proper care of my mom from now on. Don't think I'm gonna step in like I did when she was in the hospital, he said in a commanding tone. Without responding to Bob's order, I changed the subject. Oh, speaking of which, here. Your mom's been in the hospital for quite a while, right? Hospital food is bland, and they don't give you much. I bet a gourmet like her wasn't satisfied. I think the discharge process and packing will take up the morning, so why don't you take her out for some good food? You took the day off after all. How about a nice drive, just the two of you? I think she'd really appreciate it. I handed Bob a generous amount of cash. I'd set aside some money for living expenses and even Bob's personal spending, but this was more than his monthly allowance. Surprised by the unexpected bonus, Bob's spirits lifted even higher. Well, aren't you thoughtful? All right, I'll use this money and go for a drive with my mom. I'll give you a call when we decide about dinner. Make sure the house is in tip-top shape for my mom, all right? Without a hint of suspicion, Bob happily left. Everything was going just as I had planned. It was almost too simple, I couldn't help but laugh. This should buy me some time. I'm looking forward to when Bob and my mother-in-law return. With that, I continued tidying up the house. I had to finish cleaning before Bob and my mother-in-law came back. A few hours later, just as I was taking a break after finishing up, my cell phone began ringing loudly. The call came in a flustered tone from Bob. Hey, what's going on? The house is empty. That's right, after Bob went to pick up my mother-in-law, I moved all our stuff to the new house we just rented. Of course, I left some of Bob's personal belongings and a bed for my mother-in-law in the room. Oh, you're back already? You told me to clear out the room, so I emptied both the room and the living room for Mom to feel comfortable. From now on, please enjoy your time with her. I responded nonchalantly, which only infuriated Bob. You've got to be kidding me. The living room and kitchen are totally empty. After all I've done to support this family, how could you? There it was, his go-to line. He seemed to believe that saying this put him in a superior position. How naive. No, Bob, I've been the one supporting the family. Including you. Weren't you spending your paycheck on pocket money for your mom and your own hobbies? And yet, you demand an allowance from the family budget. How does that make you the breadwinner? Bob seemed surprised by my resistance, but he retorted nonetheless. His argument, however, was nonsensical. Shut it. I'm the man here. I'm the head of this household. You, as my wife, should just do as I say. Now, put everything back the way it was. No thanks, I bought all the furniture in the living room and all the kitchenware with my salary. The kids are with me, so don't worry. I also paid for the rent, utilities, and groceries of that house. So, in reality, I'm the breadwinner. Why did you decide to live with your mom without consulting me? I can't live with someone so selfish. As you wished, you can be the main provider now. Live your life as you please. It seemed that Bob finally realized my intentions. Hold on, are you saying the rent for this place? I've paid up until the end of this month. But from next month, you'll need to handle it. I've also canceled all the automatic payments for electricity, gas, and the internet, so good luck with that. Bob's words probably tipped her off to the situation. My mother-in-law also started making a racket in a loud voice. How could you do this, Catherine? Just because you have a job doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. Fine, Bob, and I will live here in luxury. Oh, does my mother-in-law not know about Bob's earnings? I hope you can have that luxurious life. That is, if your son can afford it. Anyway, goodbye. Wait, Catherine, where are you right now? I didn't bother listening to the rest of Bob's rant. I hung up and blocked both Bob and my mother-in-law's numbers. The rest is probably as you'd imagine. With the meager salary from his uninspiring job at a small company, Bob was left with very little after paying the rent and utilities. Living in a needlessly spacious apartment, where a family of 4 once lived, Bob and my mother-in-law would constantly bicker. What's with this meal? Can't you provide something better for your mother? Shut up. If you want something else, make it yourself. You're just making excuses, saying walking is too hard after slacking off on your rehab. You don't do anything at home, Mom. You're just wasting time. Having neglected her rehab, my mother-in-law's legs had become weak, and she refused to do any home workouts. Could my legs not move as I wanted, causing my frustration? She started imposing unreasonable demands on Bob, whom she had cherished so much. Maybe she's showing early signs of Alzheimer's. Even adding my mother-in-law's pension, it feels like they're living in poverty. They'd be better off if they moved to a smaller place fit for two, but it seems Bob hasn't thought of that. He probably tried to contact me numerous times, but I've blocked all communication from both Bob and my mother-in-law since that incident. Of course, my kids did the same, blocking their numbers when we moved. Bob doesn't know our new address, and he can't ask for help. Their living situation will probably collapse soon. I was earning a decent income with the help of my children, so I managed to lease a nice apartment. Each of my kids has their own room. I secured a spacious room that doubles as a bedroom and workspace. The rent might be a tad high, but with Bob out of the picture, I'm saving more than enough. My kids, who were tired of being belittled by their father, are now living freely. They've become more helpful around the house. Helping out without being criticized by their father makes chores feel good, they say. Everywhere, isn't it normal to praise and thank kids when they help? I'm glad my children haven't become bitter. I was headed back to the apartment where my kids awaited. Later, through a lawyer, I served Bob with divorce papers. I lived on my salary, while he spent all his earnings solely on himself and my mother-in-law. That's a valid reason for divorce in my book. Bob tried to argue against the divorce with various points, but my lawyer cut him off every time. The fact he claimed to be the breadwinner but didn't contribute was labeled as verbal abuse and clear financial abuse. If it went to court, Bob wouldn't stand a chance. I got custody of the kids, naturally. In exchange for not seeking alimony and child support, we agreed on no property division. After all, the savings we had for the kids' college were from my earnings. I couldn't let Bob and my mother-in-law take that. The car was in my name, and our house was rented. I'm grateful we didn't buy a house. Now, I can focus on my job without complaints. I want to support my kids in whatever they want to do. With the money saved for college and my future earnings, I should be able to cover their tuition. All right, I'm gonna work hard today. I brought something for you. Here it is. I watched closely as Jason handed a cake box to my mother. Jason's forced smile made me feel a bit uneasy. I quietly took the cake box from him. After slightly opening the box and confirming its contents, I threw it into the trash. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Jason and my mother simultaneously looked at me and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them. What I did? I asked my mother, amazed. Did you see what was inside the cake? My mother began to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she didn't think it was possible. I glared at Jason to confirm if my suspicions were correct. Jason looked frustrated and upset. Just as I thought. I clenched my fist, ready to get back at Jason for what he had done. My name's Jessica Smith. I'm 36 and I work as a caregiver. Work is busy every day, and by the time I get home at night after leaving early in the morning, I'm completely worn out. I knew the job would be physically demanding, but since getting married to Jason a year ago, we hardly see each other. Jason, on his end, works as a long-haul truck driver with irregular hours, adding to our difficulties in finding quality time together. Anyhow, we know we need to address our marital issues soon, but with both of us buried in our jobs, it's been hard to communicate. Our initial meeting was through a mutual friend. I've always been shy when it comes to love. After becoming a caregiver, I often declined invitations to social events after work. I wasn't the type to actively seek out a relationship, and after a long day at work, I just couldn't muster the energy to go out. Most of my peers were desperately looking for partners as they approached the marriageable age. Even if they were tired from work, they'd make the effort to find a romantic partner. While watching my friends passionately tackle their challenges, I, who had been nonchalantly avoiding relationships, suddenly started feeling the pressure after turning 30. Especially as everyone around me began getting married or having children. I can't go on like this. Even if I'm shy when it comes to love, I had always wanted to marry someday. So, I reached out to a friend who once invited me to a singles party, and she introduced me to a man of my age. That was my husband Jason. Jason was 2 years older than me. He was always calm and composed, so I could sense the maturity that came with his age. What I needed wasn't a fiery romance, but a stable, quiet marital life. I liked him right away. Our interests aligned, and things moved quickly. We started dating and tied the knot a year ago. We began our marital life living with my mother. Without a father, I felt bad about leaving my mother alone after getting married. I thought Jason might object to living with my mother, but he was surprisingly okay with it. Though it took some time, I was able to get married and now live together with my mother. Everything seemed to fall into place and I was at ease, but from there, unexpected developments awaited. Something I couldn't have predicted just after our marriage. Right after Jason and I got married, there was an incident at my workplace. Several employees quit in succession. The reasons people gave for quitting varied widely. Some left to get married, while others wanted a change in career. While they probably didn't consult each other and quit all at once, the end result was that those left behind had to take on twice the amount of work as before. So, I started coming home later than ever before, and our lives became even more out of sync. So, when I left work on time for the first time in a while and sat down at the dinner table with Jason and my mother, I noticed the atmosphere in the house was incredibly tense. "Hey, did you take care of that thing we talked about the other day?" "What thing?" "You forgot? I told you to open an account at M Bank." Right. I forgot, my apologies." "How could you? I told you countless times. It's really thoughtless of you to forget." My mother looked amazed at Jason, sighing heavily. There seemed to be some exchange between them that I wasn't aware of, but Jason had forgotten something my mother had asked him to do. "What do you mean by bank?" "Well, you know, Jessica, you have an account with M Bank, right? We never know what the future holds, and I think it would be wise for Jason to have one too, but he just won't listen." "I'm really sorry, I truly just forgot." "Oh, really? Well, if that's the case, it's fine." Indeed, I have an account with M Bank. My mother deposits a small amount into that account every month, thinking of the unforeseen future. Probably, she plans to save for Jason as well. But Jason doesn't seem to get that she's trying to save for him, he just hears it as a demand to open an account. My mother has a bit of a bad habit. She speaks in a curt way, which can come off as cold. Because Jason doesn't get her real intentions, their conversations often miss the mark. That being said, I myself haven't been able to talk properly with my mother lately, so I've often had fights with her. "Come on, Jason is busy too. No need to be so hard on him. You always say things so carelessly, not understanding the gravity of what I'm trying to convey." Not only is her tone sharp, but my mother also gets emotional quickly. So at that time too, it seemed that she was angry because her daughter didn't appreciate her kindness. That night in our bedroom, Jason said to me, "Your mom always seems to be nagging me. She gives me these confusing commands. Every day, until you get home, she's like a broken record telling me to get insurance, invest my money, and all that jazz. I'm exhausted from work and I just can't deal with her anymore." My mom had a time in the past when she didn't have money, and she's just worried. Instead of saying that, please just listen to her a bit. Knowing my mother's concerns, I tried to pacify the complaining Jason. On the surface, Jason seems to get along with my mother, but deep down he seemed to resent her. I get where he's coming from. I understand how annoying it can be to have someone go on and on about something you're not interested in, and even more so, how tiring it is to be constantly told what to do. But my mother just wants to ensure that Jason and I won't face financial hardships in the future. "I can't stand it anymore. I'll deal with insurance and investments when I feel like it. As for the M Bank account, it's obvious she'll only use it for her deposits or investments. Nowadays, you can't have multiple accounts at the same bank. M Bank is the closest to our house and she just wants an account, it's as clear as day." Normally calm, Jason becomes very emotional about my mother. Being able to empathize with both my mother's feelings and Jason's frustrations, I simply nodded to Jason's story, letting out a sigh, wondering if there wasn't some way to resolve things. It might be better if we lived separately. That way, we wouldn't have to deal with her constant nagging. Hey! Jason knows I don't want to leave my mother alone. Making such a spiteful remark seemed rather mean-spirited to me. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna do whatever she asks. Whether it's an account or whatever, I should just set it up for her, right? He finally commented in a resigned tone, lying down on the bed in a huff. I didn't have any more to add, feeling uneasy. I just closed my eyes and lay down like Jason. So, after living together, it had been almost a year since the three of us had started living together and our feelings had remained at odds with each other. I feared that our days of discomfort would just continue, but an unexpected incident occurred. Cancer! Yes, it's really frustrating to find out about this at my age. One day, when I returned home a bit earlier than usual, my mother nonchalantly told me she'd been diagnosed with cancer. Jason hadn't returned yet, and it seemed like a good time for her to break the news. Oh no! Is it serious? How advanced is it? It doesn't seem too serious yet, but I'm gonna have surgery soon and will probably be hospitalized for a bit. Can you handle the housework? My mother, more concerned about whether I can do the housework than her own surgery, leaves me wondering if she's being kind or just interfering. Either way, her concern over something so trivial irritated me, somehow. Of course I can manage. How old do you think I am? What's with you? I'm really worried about you. You're crabby. I get it without you saying it every time. I can handle the housework, you just focus on getting better. I don't even know why I'm getting so worked up, but the fact that my mother has cancer seems to have hit me harder than I thought. I just can't be honest with my feeling, and I found myself frustrated again at not being able to offer my mother any comforting words. All right, I get it. Jason would listen without any fuss. My mother doesn't know what Jason really thinks about her behind her back. So, seeing Jason nod on the surface in agreement to her requests, which almost sound like orders, she probably believes that Jason is on her side. While she scolds Jason in a stern tone at times, she doesn't seem to be genuinely mad at him. In reality, Jason always begrudgingly listens to my mother, and he's never seriously paid attention to what she says. I want to tell that to her, but given my current standing, I can't say anything to my mother. Even though I'm truly on my mother's side, not Jason, all I could do was murmur it in my heart. Afterwards, my mother informed Jason that she has cancer and needs surgery. I don't know how Jason reacted, but seeing the peaceful look on my mother's face before she slept, I could tell she was comforted just the right amount. However, as expected, Jason seemed deeply disturbed upon hearing about my mother's illness. How bad is your mother's illness? I'm not sure. All she told me was that it wasn't that bad. Is that so? Jason didn't seem convinced at all, and showed a cryptic reaction. With my heart in turmoil, I tried to calm down as I headed to bed. That was the end of our conversation for the day, and Jason and I went to sleep amidst the chilling silence. From that day, even more so than before, I continued living a life without crossing paths with Jason at all. It seems that my mother and Jason rarely see each other. In that case, when on earth does Jason come home? I usually go to bed before Jason returned and start my day either before he wakes up or after he has left. This is exactly what it feels like to live separately within the same house. I was starting to suspect Jason, having no idea what he was thinking. While I continued living a life without crossing paths with Jason, the day of my mother's surgery finally arrived. I wonder if Jason will come. My mother sighed in her hospital room before entering the operating room. Even though Jason won't come, I'm here. Jason. There's no need to prioritize a son-in-law over one's own daughter, especially at a time like this. Having such bitter thoughts, I wonder if I'm a narrow-minded daughter. I kept my surprise hidden and simply cheered my mother on as she headed to the operating room. You got this. The surgery ended roughly 6 hours later. During that time, Jason never showed up. Of course, I had informed him, and he should have known today was the day of my mother's surgery. I just had to assume he was busy with work. The surgery was successful, and the cancer cells in my mother were temporarily removed. She would need to stay hospitalized for a while, but I sincerely hoped she would fully recover. When my mother woke up from the anesthesia, she seemed distracted ever since she was briefed by the doctor. Of course, she was happy about the successful surgery, but she couldn't help but wonder when Jason would come to visit.
Don't worry so much. He'll come eventually.
Maybe Jason's fed up with me. Oh dear. My mother, who's emotionally volatile, upon realizing that Jason's taking forever to show up, can't help but doubt that she might be disliked. While her suspicions aren't entirely wrong, she still believes that Jason is on her side, so she probably feels betrayed. While comforting my agitated mother, I listened to her complaints throughout her hospital stay with a heavy heart. A week after the surgery, Jason finally came to visit. It just so happened that I was visiting after work, and I could see my mother's face light up when Jason arrived.
Hey, how are you feeling? I thought you'd never come, Jason.
My mother's tone made it sound like she had been waiting for a lover, which embarrassed me.
I brought something for you. Here it is.
I watched closely as Jason handed a cake box to my mother. Jason's forced smile made me feel a bit uneasy. I quietly took the cake box from him. After slightly opening the box and confirming its contents, I threw it into the trash.
Hey! What do you think you're doing?
Jason and my mother simultaneously looked at me and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them.
What I did?
I asked my mother, amazed.
Did you see what was inside the cake?
My mother began to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she didn't think it was possible. I glared at Jason to confirm if my suspicions were correct. Jason looked frustrated and upset. Just as I thought. I clenched my fist, ready to get back at Jason for what he had done.
What the hell, Jessica? Throwing away the gift I specifically bought.
Jason immediately adopted an aggressive stance, as if to argue that what he'd done was right.
What do you mean? You should know better than anyone else, shouldn't you?
I wasn't about to let Jason have the last word. For a long time, Jason and I had been living past each other, and confronting him directly like this was somewhat intimidating. But I couldn't let my mother suffer because of Jason's malice. That was the one thing I absolutely needed to prevent.
What are you talking about? Hey, try the cake. It's delicious.
Jason retrieved the cake box from the trash and pulled out the contents. It looked like a standard cream cake. But I recognized instantly. The cake wasn't from a bakery. As evidence, the cream was unevenly spread, and the strawberries on top looked somewhat pale and damaged. Yet, my mother didn't seem to notice such details, and she gazed at the cake, asking, "Huh?
Hold on, let me try it first."
I swiftly grabbed the cake from between Jason and my mother, who were close to each other, and took a bite from the edge. I really didn't want to, but there was no other choice. This was the only way to prove Jason's wrongdoing. After taking a bite at the cake, I immediately sensed something was off. First, it was incredibly salty. So salty and bad that I felt like throwing up. There was also an overpowering smell of alcohol, far more than what would normally be in such a dessert. I spit the cake into a tissue that was in the hospital room. Seeing my reaction, I could tell my mother's expression stiffened.
This is unbelievable. What's with this taste? Loads of salt and alcohol. Aren't these the very things a cancer patient shouldn't consume?
Even for healthy individuals, consuming too much salt and alcohol is toxic. For cancer patients, it further increases the risk of the disease. The idea that he intentionally wanted to feed this to my mother was horrifying. As Jason didn't anticipate I'd taste the cake, I could see him go pale.
You knew Mom's cancer treatment caused taste disturbances. So, you brought this. What's your aim?
It's not uncommon for cancer patients to have taste disturbances from treatments. I remember my mother telling me recently I can't taste the food. Given her surgery, it should improve. But if Jason was aware of my mother's taste issues, it's not surprising he thought of the alcoholic cake. My mother looked at Jason with sheer terror. She seemed to have finally realized that he wasn't on her side. And as for Jason, he finally abandoned the facade of goodwill, lifted the corner of his eye and spoke with a defiant expression.
The goal? It's obvious. To hasten this old hag's disease and cash in on the insurance money.
Jason let out a loud, almost hysterical laugh. He's insane. He bragged about doing it for the insurance money and tried to harm my mother. To know he had such intentions and would brazenly admit to them was horrifying. A chill ran down my spine.
Huh? Do you even realize what you were trying to do? That's a crime, you know. I know, and I don't care if I become a criminal. I just want to get rid of this old hag as soon as possible.
It's clear that when Jason scornfully referred to my mother as an old hag and tried to make her eat the poisoned cake, the image of Jason inside my mother's mind completely crumbled. That's how much my mother had a look of despair on her face.
You're always nagging me, telling me to do this and that, and you get mad when I don't obey. My life isn't just for you, old hag. Don't order me around. It makes me sick.
Jason vents the pent-up frustrations he's felt up until now at my mother. My mother looked at Jason with shocked eyes.
I just didn't want you to struggle with money, Jason. I don't care about that. I decide for myself. Don't interfere in my life every single time. Damn it, you ruined my plan. What are you gonna do, Jessica?
Jason glared at me while stamping his foot angrily. I held my head up high, trying not to be cowed by his snake-like eyes. In the corner of my vision, I could see my mother's frail body, crushed by despair. Wait for me, Mom. I'll drive this guy away.
Sorry to break it to you, but instead of getting insurance money, you're the one who's gonna have to pay alimony. Huh? What the hell are you talking about?
Jason laughed scornfully. He still hasn't realized. There's no way I'd confront you like this without any ammunition. I took out a large envelope from my bag and scattered its contents at Jason's feet. Seeing the contents of the envelope, the color drained from Jason's face in an instant. Looks like he recognized them. That makes things easier.
These were investigated by a private investigator. I suspected you might be cheating. To my surprise, so much evidence came out so quickly. How's it going with your mistress?
What I had laid out in front of Jason were numerous evidences of his affair brought by the investigator. Most of the photos are of him with his mistress. I didn't really want to look directly at the photos, but seeing Jason in them, leering and intertwining his arm with that woman's, fueled my determination.
How's it going? What the hell are you talking about? This is so unfair.
Realizing he could no longer make excuses with such evidence presented to him, Jason didn't try to dodge the blame. Instead, he lashed out, trying to paint me as the villain. But to me, it just sounded like the whining of a loser. No matter how much Jason shouted, I wasn't scared at all.
Unfair? Who's being unfair? Sneaking around cheating on me while pretending to be busy, and then trying to do something terrible to my mom? Unbelievable. I thought you were busy with work, but you were actually busy cheating, weren't you? I feel so stupid for feeling down because we were living separate lives.
Reflecting on my life up until now, tears naturally welled up in my eyes. I got married later than everyone else around me, but I was so happy when I married Jason. It saddened me that Jason would speak ill of my mother and that we could no longer hold a conversation together. My pent-up sadness and frustration that I couldn't vent to anyone suddenly exploded. Yet, even seeing me like that, Jason just sneered at me.
I don't care about that. I was planning to live happily with Emma after getting a ton of insurance money. But you ruined it, you damn woman.
Ignoring my feelings entirely, Jason continued to spew insults. Emma must be the name of his mistress. Doing my best to suppress my trembling body, I tried to retort to Jason. But before I could, my mother spoke up.
I've been listening, and Jason, you're unbelievable. Not only for what you tried to do to me, but how can you speak to Jessica like that? It's because of you and your daughter that I've never been happy in my married life. It's your fault.
Jason wasn't the calm and cool guy I once thought he was anymore. Distorted with ugliness, his desire to get away from me and my mother was painfully clear. My mother seemed to have finally lost her patience with Jason's incessant ranting.
Excuse me? Our fault? Do you have any idea how much we've considered you in our lives? I've been saving money for you every month. Jessica, even when she was super busy, has been juggling work and housework. And yet you trample on our efforts like this? It's unbelievable.
I could see the fire in my mother's eyes. Startled by her intensity, Jason took a step back.
Shut up! I never asked for any of that.
Jason tried to fight back against my mother, but it seemed to have no effect on her.
Shut up! Apologize to Jessica. And never come back home. Jessica can be happy without a jerk like you.
Hearing my mother shout, Jason finally fled the scene. The evidence of his infidelity remained scattered on the floor. I looked at my mother's face. Breathing heavily, my mother embodied the very image of a noble mother protecting her precious daughter.
Mom, thank you. That guy's unbelievable. Jessica, find a better man. You deserve more happiness.
I had thought my mother didn't care about me at all. But she stood up for me. She truly cared for me. Realizing that alone brought tears to my eyes, and I sobbed uncontrollably in her chest. She gently stroked my back. After that, on my way back from the hospital, I stopped by a lawyer's office and decided to proceed with the divorce process. When I got home, I immediately contacted Jason to let him know that I would be proceeding with the divorce process through a lawyer. Jason seemed to have talked to my lawyer. And just like that, our divorce was finalized smoothly. After that, Jason moved out. He's probably living with that so-called Emma. But I doubt they'll ever find true happiness. Through my lawyer, I intend to seek damages from Jason for trying to feed my mother a poisoned cake. Knowing Jason, who was hoping to rely on my mother's life insurance, he's probably tight on money now. Well, it's no longer my problem. Of course, I haven't given Jason the money that my mother had saved up for him. If nothing had happened, he wouldn't have had to worry about money. I hope he struggles. As for me, after my mother was discharged from the hospital, we started our life together. I moved to a workplace with shorter working hours so I could spend more time with my mother. I plan to enjoy life just with my mother for a while. I haven't yet given back to her. But now, I'm able to talk much more openly with my mother than before, and I'm truly happy now.
Huh? Still single at your age? Pathetic for an old maid like you.
I met my ex-husband at a fancy Chinese restaurant. Despite his persistent sarcastic remarks, we exchanged words, and then my sister, who eloped with someone else, appeared. When my ex-husband announced he'd be marrying her soon, I laughed at him mockingly.
Oh? Didn't I tell you?
Feeling on top of the world, my ex-husband was caught off guard when I made a shocking confession. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm a 39-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband, Mike, who works in the transportation business, for about 2 years. We met at work where I was previously an office clerk. I took a liking to Mike's lively and cheerful demeanor and made the first move on him. I found his easygoing and manly charisma very appealing. It was love at first sight. Upon hearing my feelings, he reciprocated, and we got married in a short span of 6 months. I thought he was a kind and pleasant person while we were dating. However, after our marriage, he turned into someone else entirely. It became routine for him to shower me with abusive words, and there were times when his actions made me feel like I wasn't even treated as a human being. I never imagined married life would be so tough and painful. Every day became gloomy, and I gradually started to fear Mike. He is a truck driver, but his job is specifically as a light truck delivery driver. I wish he'd been a long-haul driver so he would have been away from home more often, giving me some breathing space. As a light truck driver, his job entails delivering many loads to various places in a single day. So, he usually comes home in the evening. Early in our marriage, I had expressed my desire to work. I think I want to contribute to our finances. If both of us work, we can save more, and it'll be useful if we have kids. The moment I said that, Mike slammed his beer glass onto the table and started berating me.
You saying my earnings aren't enough, huh?
I never intended to imply that. Probably because he was drunk and overreacting, I found him terrifying. He seemed ready to hurl the glass at me at any moment, so I hurriedly tried to placate him.
No. I just don't want to be a burden to you, that's all. You're probably looking down on me inside. Who do you think allows us to live this comfortably? Even if you work, you wouldn't earn much. Don't act all high and mighty.
I realized after marrying him that Mike has extreme paranoia and wild mood swings. I never saw this side of him when we dated, so it was unexpected. Could I really spend the rest of my life with someone like this? The thought intensified my anxiety. But another incident fanned the flames of my worries. I'm truly happy Michelle married into our family. Mike rarely brought girlfriends home, so I was worried he'd never marry. This happened during a Thanksgiving's gathering at my in-laws' house. They are genuinely kind people who dote on me a lot. When we got married, they were over the moon, as if they had gained a daughter. I got along well with my mother-in-law. And my father-in-law was also very kind to me. One of the few consolations in my suffocating married life was dining out with my in-laws. However, in front of them, Mike began making a mockery of me. That turning point was during a family reunion.
Must be nice, huh? Having a beauty like Michelle. Look at my wife. See that flabby belly of hers?
A male relative began making fun of his wife, drawing laughter from the crowd. Beside him, his wife playfully pinched his belly and chimed in, giving a sort of husband-wife comedy routine, lifting the mood. Then, my husband turned the tables and decided to poke fun at me.
What are you talking about, uncle? Michelle looks so childlike, hardly womanly. Your wife looks way more elegant and mature.
I was left speechless by this unexpected comment and revelation. The male relative said,
Come on, cut it out.
But everyone seemed to find it hilarious. The only ones who looked concerned were my in-laws. Michelle, go to the kitchen. Help my wife with dinner preparations there. My father-in-law, seeing my distress, gave me these instructions as a way to escape the scene. Grateful, I rushed to the kitchen accompanied by my mother-in-law. Tears streamed down my face due to the overwhelming incident, but my mother-in-law comforted me as if she were my own mother. As for my father-in-law, he stepped in and chastised everyone, insisting they apologize to me. All did, except for my heavily intoxicated husband who remained defiant.
Why should a husband apologize to his wife? That's why Dad always gets ridiculed by Mom. Can't you have some dignity?
And for some reason, this led to a father-son argument. The gathering ended early that day, and from then on, the relationship between my husband and his father deteriorated. My visits to my husband's family home became infrequent. Life after that was a living nightmare. I lost my only source of joy and began to feel weak and lost day by day. Even daily chores felt monumental, and whenever my husband remembered that day, he'd shout at me.
You must have said something unnecessary to them. Thanks to you, I was humiliated in front of everyone. What are you gonna do about it?
Fearing his temper, I became constantly on edge. Living on the 10th floor of an apartment building, I often thought if jumping would offer an escape from my misery. When we're mentally drained, making rational decisions becomes a challenge, and I felt exactly that way. It was then, during one of these despairing moments, my sister visited. You haven't been in touch recently. I got worried. Michelle, you look awful. My elder sister, Catherine, who's 3 years older, worked nights. In her previous job, she was the most sought after, probably because she looked much younger than her age. It was rare for her to drop by unannounced. Turns out, she was in the neighborhood checking on the renovations of her new club and decided to stop by.
Something happened with your husband?
My sister and I were the best of buddies growing up. When I got married, nobody was happier than my sister, Catherine. She cried tears of joy and celebrated with me like no other.
I just want to disappear. Whoa, what happened?
Seeing the distraught look on Catherine's face, tears welled up in my eyes as I conveyed the painful situation I was in. Every day, it felt like I was being emotionally abused by my husband. It felt like living in a prison, a life full of pain and despair. There were moments I thought of ending it all, overwhelmed by it all. Catherine, after hearing all of this, showed visible anger, saying she's gonna go yell at my husband right then and there. But just imagining what could happen to me if she did made me even more scared. Tears streaming down my face, I pleaded with her not to confront him. Seeing my reaction, Catherine regained her composure and started brainstorming what could be done. After a silence between us, something seemed to click in Catherine's mind. With a bright expression, she whispered a plan into my ear. Hearing her plan, I exclaimed in surprise and asked if she was out of her mind.
You think that'll actually work? Who do you think I am?
Catherine said, confidence oozing from her every pore. I trust Catherine to pull it off, but the risks if her plan was discovered made me anxious.
Don't you want to get out of this and be free?
Seeing me unable to make a decision, Catherine turned serious and told me it was ultimately up to my courage. Hearing that, I made up my mind and agreed to her plan. From that day on, Catherine came over nearly every day.
People who are emotionally abusive tend to act all high and mighty in public. If I'm around, he won't be able to pull anything on you, Michelle, right?
Saying this, she visited me frequently over the next few months until her new shop was ready. At first, my husband seemed unsure of Catherine's frequent visits, but he seemed to enjoy the drinks they shared every evening, gradually warming up to her. Catherine made sure Mike drank enough to get really drunk and stayed with him until he fell asleep.
You're always joining me for drinks, so feel free to stay the night anytime.
Mike, now quite fond of Catherine, began to show her affection he never showed me, even trying to stop her from leaving. But Catherine always declined his offer with a polite smile, assuring him she'd be back the next day. For Mike, time spent with Catherine seemed like a dream. He was so enchanted by her that he seemed to have forgotten all about me. But then, when Catherine's shop was about to have its grand reopening, an incident occurred. I'm divorcing you. Out of the blue, Mike declared he wanted a divorce. Naturally, I was shocked by his words and demanded an explanation.
Why all of a sudden? I've found someone I care about more than you. I want to be happy with her. I want you to leave.
I flat out refused to accept his selfish reasoning. I didn't accept my husband's decision to divorce. However, Mike seemed to have expected this and coldly mentioned hiring a lawyer. A meeting with a lawyer present took place a few days later. Even there, Mike hurled unbelievable accusations at me.
You just want money, right? Do you want the property? I'll give whatever you ask, so let's end this.
In front of anyone, Mike made it clear he no longer had feelings for me. He seemed to want to end our marriage so badly that he didn't mind paying a hefty sum to make it happen. The lawyer, probably feeling uncomfortable, showed me the average amounts for such cases. You really don't have much affection for me, do you? I could tell where your heart was. Easily figuring out who you're thinking of and who you wish to spend your life with. I lowered my head, realizing resisting was futile, and accepted the divorce terms.
Fine. But I demand the division of the property.
He probably thinks he can just earn it back. Mike, oblivious and elated at the thought of a smooth divorce. Yet, watching him, I let out a mysterious smirk. And without him catching on, the divorce proceedings went underway. However, while I may have accepted, it was Mike's parents who firmly opposed it. Later, when we went to inform his parents, They shouted at Mike and spoke in my defense.
What on earth are you thinking? Exactly, Michelle has been so dedicated to this family, and you talk about divorce? And having someone else? You can't be serious.
His mother, teary-eyed, tried to convince Mike while his father, with a flushed face, was visibly angered and scolded him. But their words seemed to be just noise to him. Annoyed, he dismissively responded.
It doesn't matter if you accept it or not. She's already agreed to it. It's because you pushed her into a corner with lawyers.
They must have really not wanted us to divorce. They've always cherished me like their own child, and the thought of separation was painful to them. I could feel their desperate pleas, and I felt guilty for betraying them. I love them too. I would have loved to live as their daughter. If only things didn't turn out this way with Mike. Regret was the only thing that filled my heart, and I couldn't hold back the tears.
People like you are so damn annoying. I'm done with her. I'm gonna marry someone I truly care for and be happy. Stop nagging me.
Mike, now completely enraged by his parents' words, started shouting back in defiance. Naturally, they couldn't accept his decision, and Mike was disowned right there and then. And so, Mike left his parents' home, apparently eloping with his love interest, and our divorce was finalized. Half a year passed. I was dining at an upscale Chinese restaurant, invited by someone, and enjoying a meal with my parents. Isn't that Michelle? The one who called out to me was none other than Mike. I had gone outside to make a call and bumped into him in the hallway. Long time no see. Didn't think you were still around. His condescending tone hadn't changed. My face must have shown my disgust.
What's with that face? If you've got something to say, spit it out.
He wasn't shouting because we were in public, but he still looked down at me with cold eyes. I held back my anger and turned my face away.
Acting all high and mighty when you can't even stand up for yourself. Did you manage to find a boyfriend after our split?
Mocking my demeanor, Mike sneered at me. I knew this side of him only after our marriage, and I regret not realizing it sooner. It doesn't concern you anymore. Without even confirming if I was in a relationship. Mike, with his usual sly grin, kept on taunting me.
Really? Still single? Pretty pathetic for an old hag.
Mike peered into my face with an expression that screamed he felt he'd won at life, even more so than before our split. I was about to give him a piece of my mind when... Oh.
Michelle, Mike.
Didn't expect to see you two here. My sister Catherine walked into the store, calling out to both of us.
Catherine.
Perfect timing.
I was just about to share some news with Michelle here.
The smug look on Mike's face was almost disgusting as he snaked an arm around Catherine, drawing her close. I just stood there, not letting his actions fluster me, my gaze icy cold as I watched the scene unfold.
I thought I'd tell her first that we're gonna get married.
He bragged, pulling Catherine even closer. I had always suspected that his feelings for Catherine were the real reason he wanted a divorce. But looking at them now, with emotionless eyes, Mike, still not realizing the gravity of the situation, shot me a smug grin.
Sorry, I guess. I mean, I'm gonna be living the dream with her. But hey, you're not too bad looking. Maybe with a bit of effort?
I'm sorry, Mike. I can't marry you. Gently shaking off his arm, Catherine dropped the bombshell with a smile. His face was a picture of shock, unable to comprehend her statement. The truth is, I never had any feelings for you.
Wait, what? What are you saying? Didn't she tell you?
I couldn't resist, my voice dripping with mock confusion as I savored every moment of his confusion.
What do you mean didn't tell me? The whole thing, Mike, was a plot Catherine and I hatched to make sure we divorced.
And as I walked over to join my sister, we exchanged amused smiles.
Right?
Even witnessing this, Mike couldn't fathom what was going on. His words came out jumbled. Was this all just a play?
Thanks to Catherine here, I got quite the alimony from you. Really grateful for that.
Rejecting his initial proposal for divorce was all part of a plan to get as much property as possible from him.
It was all Catherine's idea. I was eager to divorce but didn't want to raise suspicion. That's why I played along. No way! Catherine would never say that.
Why not? Struggling to come to terms with the truth, Mike babbled on, refusing to believe my words. I tilted my head in confusion and asked, "Why do you say that?"
Why would Catherine say something like that? She said she's gonna marry me.
Well, if you took my sales pitch so seriously. I was just doing my job, entertaining a client. Catherine responded to Mike's comment, her brows furrowed in feigned concern. She touched her cheek with an exaggeratedly innocent gesture, sighing softly as she spoke. "I only entertained you as a client. I never had any feelings for you. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression."
So you've been fooling me this whole time? For the past 6 months?
You were such a valuable customer, Mike. Always trying to one-up everyone. It was kind of cute, actually. Mockingly, my sister spoke with a derisive laugh. The ex-husband, completely fooled by her theatrical performance, displayed his anger and raised his voice despite being inside a shop.
All those words about wanting to be with me, asking me to divorce Michelle, were all lies? Who in their right mind would want to be with someone like you, an emotionally abusive husband? What did you just say?
The sharp words of my sister infuriated my ex-husband, who began breathing heavily in agitation. While cautiously watching out for any signs the ex-husband might become physically aggressive, I observed their exchange and discreetly reached for my phone. It was hard keeping up the charade for half a year, but thankfully you're simple-minded. It wasn't like I could just stay married to you. In truth, my sister was already married when I was with my ex-husband. She has a husband who works as a bodyguard. To ensnare my ex-husband, my sister persuaded him by saying she was also going to get a divorce. From the perspective of my ex, who had never been popular in his life, the fact that someone was chasing after him so much was a delightful feeling. At the same time, he reveled in the superiority of being able to take someone away from another. Essentially, he fell right into my sister's trap.
So, about you taking time to get that divorce.
That was obviously a lie. As you can see, my marriage is perfectly fine. At that moment, a man emerged from behind, walking towards us with a smile. "Pleasure to meet you. Seems like my wife has been causing you some trouble."
You can't be serious.
"This is my husband. I invited him today to introduce him to you." My sister, with her radiant smile, made a point to show off by linking arms with my brother-in-law, exuding happiness. My ex-husband looked dumbfounded. His face a mix of anger and sadness.
It's a shame, isn't it? Wasting half a year only to end up being thrown out of your own home. It's so pitiful, I can't even bear to look.
As my ex-husband seemed dazed from the shock, he tried to lash out at me, reaching to grab my collar. But my brother-in-law swiftly intervened, handling him like he was a mere child.
What do you know about what I've gone through this past year, chasing after her? Do you understand? I don't, and I don't want to. You play with people's lives and then act all high and mighty. Do you understand how much pain you've caused me?
Facing my ex-husband's aggressive stance, my voice broke with anger and tears as I finally let out all the frustrations I'd bottled up.
The way you ridiculed me in front of our family. Your attitude towards your in-laws. All your actions during our marriage. I will never forgive you. You're going to get a taste of hell.
I then turned around and called out, "Please, come out." Emerging from the room behind me were not just my ex-husband's parents, but also my own parents and even my husband's relatives. Now everyone can see your true colors and just how pathetic you truly are. Ignoring my ex's questioning gaze, I played a voice recording I had received from my sister. It had him speaking to her in a disgustingly sweet manner. "Are you really going to break up with Michelle?"
Of course, I don't need someone useless who can only do house chores. I prefer someone mature and attractive like you, Catherine.
His sleazy voice was so palpable that it made my skin crawl. Even though it was nauseating to hear, I did not stop the playback. In front of the entire family, my ex-husband was being made an example of. Don't you love Michelle?
Of course not. She's nothing more than a maid to me. I only married her because she would be a notch in my belt, no emotional connection there.
Everyone was visibly repulsed by his comments. He started to create a scene, demanding the recording be turned off, but my burly brother-in-law wasn't having it. He restrained him effortlessly, ensuring he couldn't interfere.
She's so obedient. Just a little threat, and she'll do anything. She's more like a servant, someone I can throw away anytime. I have no attachments to her.
Having heard the evidence of the emotional abuse he directed at me, his in-laws were furious. Everyone present unanimously criticized him.
You're a disgrace to this family. How could you say such things about your dear wife?
You're pathetic, even for a man. I'm embarrassed to even call you family. As everyone looked at him with contempt, I spoke coldly. Nobody's on your side anymore. Stay away from her family. I never want to see your face again. Having masterfully executed this public reprimand, I stopped the voice recorder and asked my brother-in-law to throw him out. My ex tried to retaliate, but to no avail. He was forcibly ejected from the premises. After that, the store was locked up, but my husband made a scene out front demanding it be opened. Eventually, he was reported and taken to the police station. My sister and I, having exposed my husband's wrongdoings, gave each other a high five and shared our joy of having achieved our revenge. It felt like a celebration as we ordered food at the restaurant, and everyone showed sympathy for the hardships I had endured.
Reserving the whole place was the right call. Everyone could relax and enjoy without feeling restrained,
said my sister, Catherine, who had arranged it. I expressed my gratitude to Catherine, who had helped me through everything, and I savored a meal with her for the first time in a while. And so, I got my revenge on my ex-husband. After that, it seemed like he was almost stalking Catherine, got reported to the police again, and apparently, my brother-in-law, Mike, gave him a taste of his own medicine. After that, Mike was too scared to show his face around my brother-in-law. 13 years have passed since, and now I'm handling the accounting at Catherine's store. I'm still in touch with my ex-in-laws and occasionally dine with them. I'm deeply grateful to Catherine for helping me out of my shell. I'll repay this favor someday. With that thought, today, I'm gonna work hard alongside Catherine.